Hello, Hume 115. It is your favorite professor, Professor Trent. I'm here with another lecture summary, this time on chapters 6 and 8 of your logical reasoning textbook. So first of all, chapter 6, I want to talk about this very quickly. Chapter 6 is simply a reiteration of much of what you've learned in English courses. How to structure an argumentative essay, what are the key elements, what the various paragraphs are called. The only thing that I'm going to add to that in terms of our lecture summary, because it was very straightforward, is to aim for precise and concise language. Now that you learned in your language chapter. So you know, for me, especially if you've read my final project assignment, if you've completed your final project assignment, you know that precise and concise language is important. For example, if there is a word count on a paper, that means that your professor is urging you to spend time editing and proofreading your paper. Economic writing is the best kind of writing. And economic writing means that you pack a punch with every sentence. Every sentence adds value. Every sentence is tied to your thesis statement. That's what editing and proofreading does for you ultimately. So feel free to go back over chapter 6, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it here because you're also, for cross-pollination purposes, you're learning much of the same thing in your English courses. Now, chapter 8, fallacies. Let's talk about that. So you remember fallacies from earlier in our textbook. A fallacy is a flaw in reasoning or fault in reasoning. So a fallacy is when an arguer, this could be you or the person that you are hearing an argument from, makes a flaw in their logic, or they make a statement which has no logical evidence, all right? There are several categories of fallacies, but what I want you to focus on for this particular chapter are main fallacies that you need to know, both for my class and out there in the real world. So flip with me to page 290 in your textbook. Let's check out your glossary. So by now you've read this chapter, you've had a lot of fallacies thrown at you. You're trying to figure out which one is which, and I'm gonna help you focus on what to zero in on and study for. So first of all, let's start with the definition. A fallacy, again, is a kind of error in reasoning, an error in reasoning. The person arguing makes a statement in which there is an error in the statement and therefore an error in the logic, and the argument won't hold up. So there are various kinds of fallacies. Let's start with the first one in your glossary, ad hominem. You see this one all the time, especially during a political season. Ad hominem means a personal attack, an attack on some characteristic of the individual that is completely irrelevant to the argument. So let's say you're making an argument that I am not a good professor, but for whatever reason in your argument that you're making that I'm not a good or effective professor, you say, and she dresses terribly. She wears these terrible maroon Old Navy dresses that are ugly and don't look good on her. She has terrible taste and she cannot dress herself. She is not good at fashion, all right? You have made an attack on a particular characteristic of Professor Trent. You have not attacked the argument or the evidence that I am or am not a good professor. Rather, you have focused on whether or not I make good fashion choices and dress well or not well. So that's a silly example, but that's an innocuous or innocent example that we can zero in on. If you've watched any election season, you've seen ad hominems. You've seen them all over commercials, ads, on websites, everywhere. It's when a person is attacking a particular characteristic or part of the person that is completely irrelevant to the issue at hand. For instance, my ability to make good or not so good fashion choices is completely irrelevant to my ability to teach this course. So I hope that helped. All right, fallacy, you've got ad hominem fallacy. Now, it is not in your glossary, so please mark it in your notes. begging the question or circular reason. Begging the question or circular reason. I want you to go back through the book and find this one. This is when you use a premise as a conclusion and you use it again, a premise as a conclusion, and so on and so on and so on and so forth, such that you make circular reasoning. Your book does a good job of explaining this, so go back to the page numbers and make sure you read that section. A lot of people do this where they use a piece of evidence as their conclusion and you're like, wait a second, what's the actual claim? You're using evidence as a conclusion. That doesn't work, and then you just go around in circles with them. Again, your book does a really good job of unpacking this. All right, let's go to straw man. Straw man is when you easily refute another person's argument by making it weak. PBS has a really good video on this. This is linked in your modules. So this is when you pick apart, think like a straw house, you pick apart an opponent's argument in order to weaken it so that you can attack it. You also see this all the time during political season. The last one that I want you to mark that's not in your glossary is slippery slope. Slippery slope. So you all are too young to remember this. I'm kidding, you're not. Slip and slides, do you remember those? Like the thing you'd put out in the yard and you'd slide across it and you'd go really fast. That's what we mean by slippery. When you go from 0 to 60, like in terms of car references, 0 miles per hour to 60 miles per hour in 2 seconds, which means, another way of putting it, I'm using a lot of idioms. One thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, all right? So let's say this. I'll give an example. Let's say you're gonna present an argument to me that because you didn't make a good grade on because you didn't earn a good grade on your final project, you won't get into the school of your choice, therefore you won't have a career of your choice, therefore you'll never get a job, therefore you'll never have a family, therefore you'll never have a place to live, and therefore I have completely ruined your life because you have not earned the final project grade that you wanted, all right? So that's another silly example, but it's an idea of you go from 0 to 60 very quickly and you're on a slippery slope, which means you're going fast and it's going downhill fast. Another argument that you'll see, and you'll see in an upcoming quiz, is the case against immigration. A lot of arguers use slippery slope fallacies when they're talking about immigration. They will make a claim that immigration is going to lead to X. And they start with one claim at 0 and then they go to 60. And before you know it, the argument is such that immigration is going to lead X, Y, Z, and we're going to be there tomorrow, right? That's a slippery slope fallacy. So the two ways to remember it, the immigration issue that we just talked about, and you're earning a not so great grade on your final project is somehow going to ruin the rest of your life. Those two examples would be a slippery slope fallacy. Fallacies are so much fun once you learn them, and I just have a few that I want you to learn. Ad hominem, slippery slope, begging the question, straw man. Once you learn them, you can use them all the time. And what I mean by that is that I don't want you to be the one committing a fallacy, but I want you to have your antenna up to listen for and see fallacies all around you. As soon as you know what they are, you will begin to spot them, especially ad hominem. So the next time somebody says, Professor Trent can't teach Hume 115, she's a terrible professor because she makes awful fashion choices and she doesn't know how to dress, you can say, that's an ad hominem. Her fashion choices, her ability to dress herself has nothing to do with whether or not she can teach the course competently. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture summary on fallacies. I'll see you next time. Thank you all for listening. Have a good day.